I'm Bill Osborne, and welcome to this special program on CITI TV. Today we're going to be talking about a very special event, a very special situation that in African American history, and indeed in the history of this country and the military of this country, it's not a lot of people are familiar with. In recent weeks there has been some renewed interest because of a movie, popular movie that has been playing, but I'm talking about the Tuskegee Airmen. And the Tuskegee Airmen were known as such because they trained in Tuskegee, Alabama. But we want to visit this historic situation today. And back in World War II, I was a little bitty fellow, preschool. And so my memories of World War II are basically what people told me about and what I remember from shortly after the war. But I do know that in World War II that in a number of southern communities, in particular because of our climates, that we didn't have bad weather in part of the year as they did up north, that you had a lot of training facilities for military personnel in the South. Including training for pilots. And so you would find around in the South a number of training facilities, but the one in Tuskegee was very unique because it was for the training specifically of African Americans to be pilots. Now, what we want to talk about today is the historic significance that the Tuskegee Airmen played not only in World War II, but in changing of this country really, and certainly in changing of the U.S. military, which basically in World War II was a racially segregated military. But I have with me today a gentleman who's with the Tuskegee Airmen, and Mr. John Stewart. Great to have you with me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, we want to talk today, of course, about the Tuskegee Airmen, and of course, you have devoted a lot of time and attention to the Tuskegee Airmen down through the years, but had a career both in government and in the private sector. But we appreciate you taking time from your schedule to be in Douglasville today to talk about the Tuskegee Airmen and to be a part of this community's celebration and commemoration this year of Black History Month. Now, the movie Red Tails, which is by Hollywood producer George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, I think, worked for more than 2 decades getting ready for this film. But let me read you to our viewers just from a review of this movie, because I think it will help set the stage for what we'll be talking about today. The Tuskegee Airmen were a group of African American fighter pilots who were trained despite the racism entrenched in the United States Armed Forces at that time, namely World War II. They were deployed in action. They achieved fame and many decorations for their skills against German pilots, which included engaging and shooting down Messerschmitt's Me-262s, the first jet fighters. So successful were they in providing escort for American bombers that the white bomber pilots requested them, contradicting a study at that time which claimed that Negroes lacked the intelligence to operate heavy machinery. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen has been told before in a 1995 HBO movie that stuck close to the facts and included much material about the training of the airmen in the racist South of the 1940s. The film represented the first time the Flyers became popularly known to the American public. And so, Mr. Stewart, I think that with now with this new movie, we are seeing another round, as it were, of publicity for the Tuskegee Airmen. But tell us about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Well, the Tuskegee Airmen, if you recall, were our first black fighter pilots. But let's go back to 1939, actually when World War II began. Mm-hmm. It was thought that if the soldiers, the black soldiers, wanted to be a part of this war, that they will fight for their country and come back and be able to live like all other Americans, take care of their families. But it didn't happen. At that time, we had two armies. We had one black army and one white army. And a lot of people don't realize that there were some 15 to 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen back in those days. Let me substantiate that. As I said before, there were two separate armies. So you had one white army, one black army. So as a Tuskegee Airman, you had to have your own Tuskegee Airmen mechanics. You had to have your Tuskegee Airmen food service people. You had to have your own Tuskegee Airmen administrator, your own Tuskegee Airmen. You had to have a complete operational army that was separate. And that's hence why we said that it is about 15 to 16,000. As you may recall, they simply said that black soldiers, black men were not capable of flying this very complicated machine. Hence, that's where the Tuskegee Moulton Field, Tuskegee, Alabama came in. It was right outside of Tuskegee University. So these young men were recruited. Most of them were already college graduates, and some of them got their wings by competitive examination. They actually felt that if they went overseas and fought for the benefit of this country, that they would come back and be able to live and keep their jobs and do this type thing. And the whole philosophy was that if I can show that I'm patriotic, that I'm honorable, I am intelligent, that this country will abide. But there were some survey in 1925 when it actually said that a black man was not capable of examining flying airplanes, wouldn't follow orders. When he gets into a fight, he would chicken out, so to speak. All of that was part of the philosophy of the Tuskegee Airmen. Now, the most amazing thing about what I think about the Tuskegee Airmen is that the Tuskegee Airmen, after they got the opportunity to fly, they were part of this escorters. And by the way, they escorted a group on the 15th and 12th Army Air Force, which is Southern Air Force. Yeah. In fact, we have a big display down in Savannah, Georgia, with the 12th or the 15th Air Force. So they felt that, and they did get the opportunity. And when they got the opportunity, the most amazing thing that I like, and I think the Tuskegee Airmen is a textbook example of how to get things done, that is that they flew with bravery. They knew that they had to complete their mission, and they became so good at this as escorting the bombers until they were requested at the end of the end of World War II, when they were going into Berlin. They actually requested the Tuskegee Airmen to escort them and back based on their previous record. The whole idea, and that's his philosophy, that is the philosophy of our country, I believe, is that you do a job so good, so well, until people will request your service. And that's the thing that we do. We exist now only for two reasons: to carry on the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen and to mentor our kids. And that is another story.
Right.
Believe me. But it's important.
Right.
It's important.
Well, how did you first get involved with the Tuskegee Airmen?
That's a good point. All Tuskegee Airmen were not fighter pilots. All Tuskegee Airmen did not go through the training at Tuskegee University. I became part of the Tuskegee Airmen unit when I joined the Air Force, and some luck was shipped into Okinawa in Korea. Tuskegee Airmen served in World War II and Korea. That is, I understand it's going to be coming up, that we need to publicize that, because some of the young, and that's why I'm a little younger than you see the other guys.
Right.
I have that problem all the time. I mean, I know I look a little younger, period, and that's the bloodline from South Georgia. But people look at me, you a Tuskegee Airman? I said, yeah. You look mighty young to be a Tuskegee Airman. And you have to go through that explanation, that Tuskegee Airmen served in World War II and Korea. As a matter of fact, our base commander, General Davis, was base commander, one of the bases in Korea in the early 50s, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
And you talk about General Davis, who was one of the very first
Tuskegee
Airmen, first 3 or 4, as I recall, and then of course went on to become, I think it ended up as a 4-star general.
As a matter of fact, speaking of General Davis, his father passed right here in Atlanta, Georgia, years ago. You're right. That at the beginning of the first class in 1941, there were only 5 graduates. I think 11 started, but 5 made it.
Right.
And General Davis was one of them. And at that time, General Davis was a captain, because previously he had finished West Point.
Right. Well, I was reading concerning the Tuskegee Airmen, and that the training being very tough, and that about 80% of those who initially started the training were not able to complete it. And I think and what I was reading, and I'm not sure if it's in the movie or not, because I've not yet seen the movie, basically said if you look to your right, to your left, to the front, and to the back, now with what you see in yourself, that's 5 people. 4 of you will not make it through.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're right. And in fact, that was a general slogan, you know, in the military, you know, especially during that time, you know, that you look to your right or left, there's a great possibility that one of you are not going to be here.
Right.
So that kind of thing. But the red tail, you're absolutely right. It brought out all of the historical and the publicity that we needed. George Lucas did a tremendous job. As I said previously, and it gave an opportunity to profile some stars that you probably never heard of. For an example, one of the stars is from our local area here, LaGrange, Georgia, Eliza Callie.
okay.
And I had the pleasure of being in LaGrange when they profiled, highlight, or premiered the movie Red Tail, and I was there with him, and we had a great time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us the title of the movie, Red Tails, is obviously referring to the aircraft, but so tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, back in those days, they had to come up with some kind of identification. And as a matter of fact, all squadron had their own identification. So they had to come up with some type of identification to let the world, let the people know who were the black pilots. So they painted the tails red to justify it, the whole tail red. And hence, that's how this red tail angel all got started. As a matter of fact, the Germans, they called them red-tailed angels because they became so good and so good. And we have a lot of original airmen lived right here in Atlanta, Georgia. For an example, you had Colonel Freddie Henderson, who lives in Thomasville, Georgia. He's buried in Thomasville right now. He was one of the Tuskegee that was shot down. He was shot down twice and got back to his organization. And he lived here in Atlanta for years. And then when he passed, they moved him. They took him on back home in Thomasville, Georgia.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, looking at from the website on the Air Force, and they were talking about, said by the end of the war that of the men who were Tuskegee Airmen who had been overseas on combat assignments that said there were 409 German airplanes that were either destroyed or damaged, 950 ground units, sank a battleship destroyer, and they ran more than 400 bomber escort missions during World War II.
Yeah.
Obviously a very impressive record.
Very impressive record, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And let me just kind of review, capsulize what you've said. We did the 12th under the 12th Air Force. We did 1,267 total missions. Under the 15th Air Force, we did 311 total missions, and out of that, there were 136 aircraft that was actually shot down. There was 237 aircraft that was damaged on the ground, so to speak. And of course, yes, you mentioned about one jet aircraft. And that was during the time when the Germans were experiencing with jet power, jet aircraft. And it was the Tuskegee Airmen that actually shot down the very first jet aircraft.
Right.
You know. Yeah.
Right. Now, for our viewers, a couple of things in recent years on recognition long overdue for the Tuskegee Airmen that back in 1998, then President Clinton signed the law that established the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site at Motonville there in Tuskegee to commemorate and interpret the historic actions of the Tuskegee Airmen. And this site opened about 4 years ago. National Park officials and of course, easy to get to that site from here, just going down I-85. And of course, not too many years ago, with President George W. Bush, Congress had passed so that the Tuskegee Airmen received the Congressional Gold Medal. And so there was some recognition for these men for their bravery. And even though, as you say, when these men came back to this country after World War II, there still was, they came back to a segregated society.
Exactly.
Their service and a lot of things that were going on in our world at that time were part of what led to the events of the 50s and 60s and on up to the present day. So I think that what we wanted today was to pay special attention, special tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen. But before we close this program, I want to switch over a little bit and let's talk about John Stewart, the individual.
Okay.
Now, I know you've got a son who's in the Marines who's a pilot.
Yes.
And you told me you were in the Air Force.
In the Air Force, yes.
But tell me just a little bit about some other things you've been involved in and about your family.
My son, and we named him John Stewart II. We call him John. He was born on my birthday. So, and he was born in Memphis, Tennessee, when I was in the private sector, the Gulf Oil Corporation. And we finally moved back here to Atlanta under the Carter, when we had that very first energy crisis and this type of thing. But during his growing up, that was our hobby. Our hobby was flying radio-controlled aircrafts. Okay. So he wanted, when he graduated from high school, we sat down and wanted to know what he wants to do. He said, "Dad, the only thing I want to do is fly." And I said, "Well, you know, you got to go to college." We sent him to Morehouse and stayed there for about a year, and he was, you know, it was too close to home. Every weekend he's knocking on the doors, talking about borrowing the car, and I said, "No, this is not going to work." So I sent him to Florida A&M University. It's where I graduated from. Right. And all Tuskegee Airmen did not graduate from Tuskegee University. They came from all over the country. Right. But he became part of, he went through his training, And he served in Iraq. He did 2 tours in Iraq. He did 1 tour in Djibouti. He got out, and now he is, it's a combination. He just got over there maybe 6, 7 months ago, but it's a combination. He's working out of Dubai. I guess I'm pronouncing that right. It's Dubai. And he's what they call a manager of some private group over there. And I don't know, he doesn't talk to me about all of the detail. But that was part of it. And I personally, I was born in South Georgia. I was born in Fitzgerald, Georgia. It's a great little city. Everybody knows everybody. You know, so it makes it very pleasant. I was reared up there, and I left and joined the Air Force, and because that's what I wanted to do. In fact, back in those days, 1950s, that was the only thing to do. My parents didn't have the money to send me to college, so I went through 4 years of Air Force and 4 years active reserve, and spent some time in Korea. And when I got through, I was discharged. I went to Florida A&M University,
right, and
came here. I graduated in 1962. My very first job was working at Carver Vocational School, which is old Carver High School right there, which is also old Clark College campus. My first wife, mother, graduated from that campus in 1925 and 1930. Right. You know, see. And at the same time, I got a job with Ebony magazine. And Ebony, as you know, is a African-American owned magazine at that time that publicized the events and the progress of black citizens. Actually, I was part of the group that did the survey all over the United States that convinced the marketing white population that we were a very vital group of people and spent a lot of money. That was part of my job back in the 1960s. And that's how we convinced, that's how Ebony survived. We convinced that if we were a separate nation at that time, we would be the 8th richest country in the world, because we're still spending a lot of money. Right. So we convinced the public relations, the marketing, the advertising companies to do business with us. And I approached an oil company years ago, and they took an ad from me. They were impressed with my presentation, and I got a job right here in Atlanta, Georgia. 1963, you probably know the guy that hired me, Milton Ferris, Mr. Milton Ferris. Right. And so I took a job with them as a regional marketing representative in 1963. Worked all over the Southeast, Florida, and that's when the interstate was just getting started, and we did a lot of work. My job was buying real estate property, citing real estate property, and training, at that time, black dealers. So the Miami Turnpike, all those Gulf stations you saw on Interstate 75, all the way up to Detroit, all the way through Louisville, Kentucky, 65, that was my territory. And I enjoyed it. I had a great life. I mean, it really has been a great life. Right. It really opened my eyes in terms of the potentiality one could do in this country, but you have to do it. See, this is, I'm a Southern Baptist too. I try to convince all the young kids that this is a competitive society. This is competition. It has nothing to do with anything else. If you look at it from the point of doing what's best and making a living, all you have to do is compete. That's what you got to do, you see. And I know it's hard, but that's what this life is all about. Right. So that's you know, it's been a good life. And then I was in Memphis, Tennessee when Dr. King was assassinated, representing Gulf Oil. Right. I bought a home in Memphis. In fact, I bought a house in Nashville. They sent me to Nashville. I was there in Nashville 1 year, and I bought a house in Nashville, closed the house, and the next day They called me from Atlanta. I was Southern Regional Headquarters of Gulf Oil Corporation. They said, we're going to transfer you to Memphis. And I said, I just bought a house. And they said, don't worry about it. You know, send me the papers. We'll take care of it. Go take your wife up there in Memphis and look at another place. And
right.
we had a great time. Had a great life.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ebony Magazine, which we have Councilmember LaShawn Burdanley had given this to me, and of course the cover story is Red Tails.
Yeah.
With some of the stars. We'll let our TV cameras span this a little more closely later, but this is the February edition. A lot of great information concerning the movie and the stars, but also one of the things that I found very interesting in looking at this is that they are talking about people who were the original Tuskegee Airmen and some individual stories, not only of them, but wife and one of their sons. So, but great coverage in here in Ebony Magazine. But I want to thank you for being with us today. I mean, you know, a movie is great. But what's even better is a reality, and I think that this movie is an excellent movie, but even more is the reality of what the men who were the Tuskegee Airmen and all of their support. As you say, it takes about 15 or 16 people on the ground to keep the pilot in the air.
It really does.
And appreciate you being here in Douglasville today.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And wish you the very best. To our viewers, thank you for joining us today for a special program on CITI TV.